I think we are live, although I cannot see the live button, but on Facebook it says live. So I will just start talking. Ja, herzlich willkommen bei meinem heutigen Livestream. Mein Name ist Dan Lipinski. Ich kandidiere bei der Wiener Gemeinderatswahl am Stadtwahlvorschlag der neuen Volkspartei. Und ich danke sehr der Plattform Christdemokratie, dass sie diesen Talk hier heute hostet und organisiert hat. Vorher noch möchte ich kurz, weil man es nicht oft genug erklären kann, zeigen, wie man abstimmt. Und zwar, Moment, jetzt technischer Fehler hier bei mir am Laptop, der redet mir das rein. So, Entschuldigung. Wie man abstimmt. Man kann es nämlich nicht oft genug erklären. Wer mich im Wiener Gemeinderat haben will, muss da meinen Namen hinschreiben. So, ich stehe falsch. Hier meinen Namen, Ledochowski oder 33 hinschreiben. Die Plattform Christdemokratie empfiehlt noch andere christliche Kandidaten. Wer einen zweiten christlichen Kandidaten empfehlen will, kann hier auch den Namen Demek oder 270 schreiben. Tolle Frau. Heute haben wir einen ganz besonders tollen Gast. Er ist ein Abgeordneter des amerikanischen Kongresses für die Demokratische Partei. Ich kenne ihn schon seit 10 Jahren, ein beeindruckender Mann, ein mutiger Mann, der für die Familie einsteht, für den Schutz des Lebens einsteht, der ein gläubiger Mensch ist und meines Wissens der vorletzte Pro Live Demokrat im Kongress ist. Herzlich willkommen. Welcome, Dan Lipinski.
Guten Tag. Dzień dobry. Hello.
Tag. Dzień dobry. Guten Tag. In Austria, actually, we say Grüß Gott, which means greet God. So we are.
I was trying to remember as I was getting on here what the correct Austrian, and how could I forget that? Grüß Gott.
Never mind. Guten Tag is fine, but we take big pride in our own way of speaking German. So I always say Grüß Gott, even if I'm in Berlin, I don't care.
Well, I lived in Zurich, Switzerland 30 years ago, and so I learned Schweizerdeutsch.
Wow.
I couldn't actually learn it. I decided that I was going to learn Hochdeutsch because I was told I would never be able to speak Schweizerdeutsch. So
I know.
Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch.
Wow. Dann können wir auch auf Deutsch sprechen.
And I'm going to stop. I'll stick to English from now on.
Yeah, we continue English. And if I'm not mistaken, we have never talked about this, but Lipinski obviously is a Polish name, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So, okay. We've come around here, I think.
Yes.
So Dan, I introduced you shortly, but so I said that you are a sitting member of the United States Congress for the Democratic Party, and that I told my audience that I'm very proud to know you. You are a very strong man with strong convictions and a very brave man. And I got to know you as somebody who really strongly defends, family, the right to life, and that you are also a pious man. So I would very much like to ask you if you could tell us why you went into politics, how your faith helped you, and if you could share your experience and share how you're doing as a pious Catholic in the United States politics.
Well, thank you for that description. I got into politics. I've been in Congress for my 16th year, and it will be my last year as I lost my primary election earlier this year, but we can talk more about that later. My father was a member of the United States Congress also. My father did not go to college. He came up through politics the old-fashioned way in American party machine, urban party machine politics. But he was always, to him, being Catholic was important, but it was just sort of, it was part of him, and he didn't talk a lot about it, but it was an important part for him, and he was pro-life. So he served for 22 years. He retired. I ran in the first time in 2004 because I was always brought up to, I was taught in my at home, at church, in my Catholic school, that we should all serve in whatever way that we can. And I knew I had the ability. I, unlike my father, didn't go to college. I had a PhD in political science. I was a political science professor at the time, but I moved back home to the Chicago area, and I ran for Congress in 2004 because I wanted to serve. And I tell you, I was just rereading something that George Weigel, who was the Pope St. John Paul II's biographer. George Weigel wrote about me after the primary election, and he said, and I think this is very accurate, that I served in Congress, in elected office, to serve my constituents, serve my country, and defend the truth. And that's the way that I saw it. I hope and pray that everything that I do is first and foremost for the glory of God. And that is something that, again, it is very deeply ingrained in me. And I know that's what we are all supposed to do, no matter what we are doing. And I had the special opportunity, the privilege, the honor, the blessing to be able to serve in Congress for these 16 years. And politics, it's not easy. There are tough decisions sometimes that you have to make. There are compromises that you have to make, and I understand that in politics. But I was always very clear that there's no compromise to protecting life. And so I said unabashedly, I would always be pro-life. When I first ran for Congress, I knew that I would be in the minority in my party, the Democratic Party, but there were still a good number of pro-life Democrats. And as the years went on, there became fewer and fewer Democrats. 2010, we went through a time with a new healthcare bill that got passed. And the big battle on that was whether abortion would be funded, and insurance that covered abortion would be funded. And I was one of only a couple of Democrats who, in the end, held out and said, no, I can't support this because it provides funding for abortion. And that, after that point, was a real turning point. And there are fewer and fewer pro-life Democrats in elected office. Right now, I am one of 2 or 3 left. So next year we will have we'll have 1 after I'm gone. But I said I was never going to give that up, and I knew it could cost me my office, but I was willing to do that. And I've never at one moment regretted that. I'm proud that I stood strong. I hope that I am a good example to others. I hope they don't look at me and say, well, I don't want that to happen to me. I hope they look at me and say, that's a good example of what we are to do. And I tell you, I never thought that I could be as happy as I am and lost. But I know I stay true to what I know is right and to defend the truth. And that's much more important than any political office. I lost an office. I didn't, I didn't lose anything else that's much more important to me. And most important, I didn't trade my soul for to stay in office a couple more years.
Amazing. A few months ago, during our Corona lockdown, some friends started a YouTube channel which was called Hoffnungsvoll. So, full of hope. And I was invited to talk about hope in politics. And I mentioned 3 men I knew who paid a high price because they had hope. And I mentioned you because obviously you paid a high price. You lost your seat in Congress. And I can see you haven't lost you're still a happy man, and I'm so glad to hear that you didn't lose your joyful character about this, because obviously, I mean, you have to start your whole career, a new career, I guess, or you will continue teaching more now.
Well, first let me say, my patron is Pope St. John Paul II, and I'm as we mentioned, I'm Polish. My father, although I don't have any connection left to family in Poland, my father was only actually half. His father was Polish. My mother's, both her parents were Polish, and I always have found that I think that there is something about, especially people with Polish mothers. We are generally more conservative, faithful, but I don't think a lot of Polish people have. We're not always the most optimistic people, I would say. So I always looked at Pope St. John Paul II and said, here's a man who lost all of his immediate family by the time he was 18 years old. He lived through 2 of the most brutal regimes in history, certainly the 2 most brutal regimes in the 20th century. I mean, he was directly impacted by both of them. Everything he went through, everything he saw, and yet his pontificate was all about hope and do not be afraid. And so, anytime that I feel that, I look at the world and there's a lot of things that I'm not happy with the way things are going in the world, especially the Western world, but in general in the world. I'm not happy with the way society is going, but I always think that we have our hope. We know where our hope lies, and it lies in Jesus Christ. And I'd say one of the things that we know each other through the International Catholic Legislators Network, and it has really helped me to understand. I'm very proud to be an American. I'm very proud to serve in the United States House of Representatives. And I think America has been a beacon of hope and freedom for the world. But I also know that I don't know what God's plans are. And I'm going to do everything I can for my country. But again, what is more important than anything else is serving God. And that comes first. And God, our hope is from Him. And so, my plan going forward is what I really want to do is evangelize young Catholics, and that's what I want to do, and use my experience to hopefully help them. So I want to just continue serving and serving God and figuring out the best way for what He's calling me to do.
Now I have another question, because you probably know, in Europe, at least in Austria, we have something called Clubzwang. So as a politician, I'm not free to vote as my conscience says. The party agrees beforehand, and then we vote, as together as one bloc. Obviously, it's different in the United States. So you could always vote for pro-life legislation and against pro-choice legislation, but still, as you mentioned, you were a member of a party which more and more became pro-choice and less pro-life. So my question is, how what did your conscience say? Because, you were obviously also, I guess, I didn't follow it as close, but you were probably also supporting colleagues who were pro-choice. And so where was the line you were drawing to say, okay, I'm part of a system which is not perfect, but maybe even bad. And where's the line I draw? Where will I just stop, and lie down all my offices?
That is a great question, and it's something that, again, it's not easy, and something that I certainly struggled with. But as you said, we are, well, traditionally, historically, up until this point, really, in our history, and it might be changing now, in the United States, we are not required to vote the party line, except now more and more Americans are so strongly dividing, and the parties are strongly dividing in a way that if you step out of the party line, people don't consider you to be part of the party anymore. And that's really what happened to me more than anything. And abortion was the number one issue. Abortion, there were, between last primary election and this one, there's over $6 million spent against me by the abortion lobby to get rid of me. But one of the things I really believed was that they used the issue not just as the issue of abortion itself, but also as a signal that I'm not really a Democrat, because if I'm pro-life, that means I'm in with the other guys. I must be a Republican if I'm pro-life. So it's getting tougher and tougher. But I always said that if I could not vote my conscience, I would, no longer be a member of the Democratic Party. I couldn't be an elected official as a Democrat. And so I always voted my conscience, no matter what anyone said or did, no matter what party leadership said to me. I always, would vote my conscience. And as long as I could do that, I felt that I was doing my best. And I understood that a Democrat was going to represent my district. And that was the bottom line. It's either going to be me, or it's going to be another Democrat who was not pro-life, who did not believe in protecting religious liberty, who did not support the family. And so I thought I could at least play that role as a Democratic elected official who takes those positions, because I'm going to be replaced by someone who is very, to say the least, does not support those positions that I have supported.
So what would your advice to me be? Advice for me, because we have elections now. I have a rather good chance to get elected. I need 850 direct votes. So it doesn't sound a lot, but still 850 people need to write my name, and Ledochowski is not that easy, unfortunately, but still. And people come to me and say, well, Jan, we support you, but your party, although our party program says it is pro-life, and it's a great party program, and we have many good people in the party, but still there are also strong voices which are openly pro-choice, or they just don't really care about it. And they say, well, Jan, they just use you. They just want to have our vote. They want to have the conservative vote, the Catholic vote, the evangelical vote, but we don't fall for it. So what would your advice be? I mean, because there's maybe some truth to it.
Well, the other thing is, I remember a colleague of mine a few years ago who was he was an evangelical Christian, very strongly pro-life. And I had a lot of people tell me all the time I had to get out of it. Either I had to get out of the Democratic Party because I'm pro-life, or was told I had to become a Republican, and others just want to kick me out of the Democratic Party because I was pro-life. Democrats want to kick me out. Republicans says I need to switch to become a Republican. So I was talking to a colleague of mine one time, evangelical Christian, who said, well, what I always say to those who are pro-life and say I need to get out of the Democratic Party is, you need to proselytize people in the Democratic Party. You need to be the voice within the party that hopefully brings change and has an influence. There's no use in the Republican Party is pro-life already. So I'm in the Democratic Party to try to change the party. So there's also that part, is to be a voice within the party, to be a witness. I mean, I know that there are people who were sort of on the fence on the life issue in my party. And there's no question that they look to me, and in those who really strongly oppose my position within my party, they saw me and they understood, what I believed, how I voted, how and why I protected the dignity of every individual. And I'm hopeful that that had an impact on others, that I was that meant something to them, whether or not they changed, at the very least, it made them think. And I think I played a very important role in the party in that way, and hopefully we'll continue to do that and maybe bring a change to the party. So in that way, even though most of my colleagues didn't agree with me, I saw that there could be value for me within the party in trying to change the party. And so that's another value that I saw in being a Democrat.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think did the culture change so dramatically? I mean,
well, we could
happened?
talk for many days on that. I'm not even sure where to start on that one, but the culture, and I truly believe that politics is downstream from culture, as St. John Paul II had said, and I think those who, to a large extent, my belief is those who have a lot of influence on the culture, in entertainment. I think that's a big part of it. I think that just a lot of ways that we have lost our moorings, and I also believe that there are changes that occurred in the 1960s that we're still living out today. And I think the Catholic Church, as much as I hate to say this, did not do a good job. I'll just speak for the United States. Did not do a good job of catechizing young Catholics in the time that I was growing up. I was born in 1966, so I was in grade school in the 1970s, and we were not well catechized. We were not taught of what it means to be Catholic, or why we believe what we believe, and why we believe about life and family. And I think that had something to do with it also. And we are now very much a Western society, adrift, and it's the most important battle right now that we have as Christians. It's both to bring people to Christ, but also we're also called to change our society. So that is and I don't think politics is very important. In government, the laws are very important, and the laws are helpful, and certainly you need to protect life. But I don't believe that through government action is the most important way to change our culture. And I think that's why, as I move forward and move out of politics, even though it's a very high calling, very special vocation to be involved in government, in politics, there are many other ways that I know that I can have an impact, and we can all have an impact. And we're all called to, we're all priest, prophet, and king. That's who we are called to in Jesus, and we all have an important role to play.
What I always wonder when I watch a lot of American news channels, I'm very much interested in what's happening there. And it seems so, both parties basically seem to be radicalized. However, from my point of view, even more the Democratic Party than the Republican Party. But we can obviously discuss about that. And what I find so strange that all those who were running for the presidency from the Democratic side, they were all of them radically pro-choice. I mean, even Joe Biden, until birth, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you think? Do those people really believe that? Or is there some kind of cultural internal pressure that they think they have to say it? Because it's so hard for me to believe that really somebody believes that this is a good thing.
Well, I think there's a few things going on. One is the very mistaken idea that has been put forward and really has been taught to so many people is that this is an issue of women's rights, and the dignity of women depends on abortion, and that to be pro-life is to be anti-woman. And I think a lot of people just have, they believe that. They truly do believe that. And so they think that they are, supporting women by being pro-choice. And I think that's simply what some people believe. Others, I think, are just influenced by the fact that I've watched colleagues of mine change from being pro-life, many of them. They were pro-life and they changed their position. And that I cannot, well, I'd say I can't understand that, but we're all fallen, and none of us, we're all sinners. But I don't, I've watched people change, and I think they change just because they know, first of all, there's a lot of money. As I learned, there's a lot of money on the other side, and there's not much money on the pro-life side. In United States politics, money is incredibly important, very important to get your message out, to get onto TV with advertising. That's very important, and to get people out to vote and have people working for you. The money is important, and that also has an impact. And I think some of these, the abortion lobby made it clear to Democratic presidential candidates that you better be with us 100%, or else we are going to be against you in the primary, for presidential primary. And Joe Biden, very sadly, for more than 4 decades, he at least opposed federal government funding for abortion, and he changed his position on that. And I think it was simply because these groups came to him and said, we will come out against you, and you will have no chance to win the nomination unless you change your position here. And I think that's probably what happened. I'm very hopeful if Joe Biden is president, that Joe Biden will go back to supporting the position that he had held for more than 4 decades, and that he truly does understand, at least, that this is not an issue. I mean, it's not an issue that most Americans agree with. A majority of Americans do not support their tax dollars going to pay for abortion. But once you get inside the party politics, that's where the pro-abortion side has all the power.
But one could argue that Democratic voters want that. let's suppose you have been elected into office, and that the majority of your voters wants you to support pro-abortion legislation. So where do you draw the line? Because you know, we as politicians are supposed to represent the people. So when I say, well, I do not represent you, I only obey my own conscience and God, there's a potential for a conflict.
There certainly is, and I used to be a political scientist, and so the whole idea of what is a representative to do, and to what extent are they called upon just to reflect the people who vote for them? To what extent can they vote their conscience? And I believe that, but I'm not going to be in politics. And I think people need to be able to vote their conscience. I mean, the right of conscience is extremely important. I don't give that up by running for office. We went through, and certainly this is something that came up constantly in my elections, primary elections. But I would always, because my opponent will always say, well, 80%, and I think the number is just made up of people in this district, you know, are pro-choice. And I think really what she meant was 80% of Democrats in a district. I still think a majority of voters in my district are probably pro-life, but that's counting the Republicans and the independents. But again, you're getting into party politics here. I wasn't going to, and I understand the argument. I clearly understand the argument, and I think it's important to represent constituents. But there's just no way that I could ever violate my conscience, and even if I believe that my constituents did not support the position that my conscience tells me is the correct one.
Now, you know, I cannot talk to a US representative without mentioning your presidential elections, and also what is going on now in the United States.
I was hoping you wouldn't do that, but go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I'm very much interested in what you think about it. So first of the elections, Trump and Biden, and also what's going on with Black Lives Matters and the demonstrations or riots and the whole issue of identity politics. What's your idea? Are you here more on the Democratic mainstream, or do you have also a separate position on this?
I'm not in the Democratic mainstream on this. First of all, we are. I don't even know where to start on this. You say, I think that Joe Biden is a decent man. I think his politics, certainly, I agree with much of it. Certainly not all of it. I am very concerned, though, about where the Democratic Party in general is going. You know, especially, you know, it just has gotten worse in this year. You cannot ever, you know, identity politics, I think, is a way that it just it's tearing our nation apart. We all should be in this together as a country, as a society. I think in general, identity politics that pits one group against another, however you want to divide that identity up, is not good. And I think that we as Christians are, you know, called to be truly inclusive. I mean, the word inclusive is used all the time now, but it doesn't really mean inclusive. It means include those. We include you as long as you agree with us. That is not Christian. I think, unfortunately, President Trump, in some ways, he has been, he's been very good on the life issue. There's other issues that he's also been very good on religious liberty issues. He's been pretty good, although his rhetoric's been a lot more than his actual actions on that. But when it comes to pro-life, he's been very good. And he, in many ways now with what's going on with the rioting in the country, he really is appealing in a way that, it's if we are two sides, if we are two tribes, as we keep talking about it here, then I understand his being pulled towards President Trump into law and order, and those are things I think law and order are very important. But I can't help but think, and I keep going back to same man, Pope St. John Paul II, and I think that we are called to something so much more, in bigger and better. Getting down into the dirt in these fights and being divisive. And I think people on both sides are divisive. President Trump is divisive. A lot of Democrats, the radical and the progressive Democrats, are very divisive. We are called to build up people, and we are called to have hope, and to not just in politics use our whatever is convenient at the moment, whatever we think can stir people up. It's very appealing to do that. It's very appealing when you feel like someone's taking a swing at you. You want to hit them back, and you just don't want to. I think we really need to sit down as, especially Christians, and there's been a lot of talk, and I understand a lot of Christians supporting President Trump, and I completely understand it. As I said, a lot of good things that he has done, but I don't want. First of all, I've argued this with some of my Republican friends for 4 years now. I said, if Donald Trump becomes the face of the pro-life movement, I think in the long term we lose. We lose out, because we do not want people to be able to say, if you are pro-life, you are like Donald Trump, because a lot of other things that Donald Trump embodies is not what we who are truly pro-life and truly value every single individual. We are not as Donald Trump is, and the way Donald Trump treats people. And so it's very tough. It's very tough in American politics right now, when we're, again, being told we're forced to choose one side or the other. And I've never, I've chosen to be a Democrat, but I've also chosen to be Catholic first. And I'm planning on writing a book. I did a commencement address last year at Ave Maria University, where I told the graduates that they need to be Catholic first. Don't fall into this trap of thinking you need to be either a Democrat or Republican. You need to sign up for everything on the right or sign up for everything on the left. Because as Catholics, we don't fall neatly into either of those sets of beliefs or policy prescriptions. We need to be Catholic first, and that's the most important thing. Don't fall into this trap, and I'm afraid that that's where we are going right now. This presidential election, not looking forward to the election, or I think after the election it's going to be tough. I'm expecting right now that Joe Biden is going to win. I don't necessarily think he definitely will win. Everyone thought Hillary Clinton would win 4 years ago, but there's so much healing that needs to be done. And I think Catholics especially can play an important role in helping to bring healing and a true understanding of human ecology. It's not going to be easy, but I think that needs to supersede our present political times. So, that is a very complicated view of the presidential election and what's going on in the United States. But I'm very distressed by what's going on. But go back to, you always have to have hope, and not only have hope, but let everyone know the reason for our hope.
Well, that would be a perfect, quote to end. But unfortunately, I have still one more question, because I would like to switch now to the other side of the pond. What do you think about our situation in Europe? The development, European Union takes, Brexit, the growing Muslim population. And so what's your point of view? Because we look over to the United States and most of us don't understand a thing what's happening there. I think it's probably the same over there.
Well, first of all, don't watch the don't watch the news, Jan. Don't watch the US news. I don't watch it.
Okay.
I've always thought that until very recently probably, that the United States, sort of culturally, or society, but in general, with a nation with much more religious faith, many more people who are strong Christians, real believers, and I think in general, I mean, talking about Europe, and I have to stop myself. We can't really generalize because it varies tremendously across Europe. I still, I think about Poland because I still have, I know so much about Poland and what's going on. Although, I hear that there's a lot of division in Poland right now, and questions about though it's been a country which a very strong Catholic faith, that see a decline there. I think it's in the United States right now. We're going through what is our country? What do we believe? And we're not we're not based on a nationality. We're people from all over the world came to the United States, and this is something that is going on, but no one's really talking about it. Is trying to figure out who are we, and this idea that it was the New York Times started this with 1619 Project. The United States is all based on slavery, and that is disastrous to our country for people to start believing that. And as I said near the beginning, I think the United States has been about freedom and being that beacon of freedom. We have been very much a nation where freedom is protected, but our culture has always been a culture that was very much based on general Christian principles. And it is if you go back to a Frenchman in the 1840s, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America, and he had it straight on as almost 200 years ago. We have great freedoms in the United States, but it is our mores that hold us back from living out all of our freedoms. If we did, our society would fall apart, and our Christian values, permit us to, bring us together to help one another. And so, looking at Europe has a very different history, obviously, but I think there's not the same exact questions, but there are those questions, same types of questions I think are there in Europe. right now is and there's a lot of nationalism going on, and I think there's a healthy nationalism and there's an unhealthy nationalism, and we could go very deeply into that, which I don't want to, but I think it's going back in Poland. In St. John Paul II was all about not allowing the Soviet Union to crush the Polish culture. And it was the culture and what all the values that come from that culture in the history, which allowed the Polish people to rise up and allowed a peaceful, relatively, very peaceful revolution. But it was those cultural values, and it's so hard to talk about today. And I'm looking at your website, and I just said if I had a lot of those things on my website today, especially as a Democrat, I would have been kicked out a long time ago. But a lot of those are the values that I believe, cultural values and values of family in life that are critical for any free society. And somehow we need to regain those in a way that is not saying, we have to be very, very clear that we are not saying that the state and religion should be one. That is dangerous to not just to the state, but it's dangerous to religion. And these are things that the Catholic Church has gone through, and I think has come to a good place right now. But in general, when we're talking about society, we have to figure out how we do this. And we talk about Muslims, in Europe, also the United States, but not quite as many. It's a question of how do we come to a common understanding of how our culture, more than anything, our culture will determine our future. If we are peaceful, if we are economically successful, it comes down to culture and trying to figure out how we can come to an agreement on what culturally we need to come to some agreement on, so that we can all live together in harmony and successfully and in freedom. And those are discussions that are not going on, but we need to be having those discussions, and we need to be the ones that are bringing those discussions to the fore. But we get shouted down all the time because we start being told that we're trying to impose our beliefs on others. That very well. But let me just say one last thing here. I'm a political scientist. I'm a social scientist. And I don't believe these things because I'm a social scientist. I believe them because, first of all, we have reason. We also have our faith, which is based on revelation, but also reason. But social science shows us what it takes for a successful society. And for example, intact families are crucial to children, their development, and so they are crucial to society. And as Pope John Paul II again said, and this is the Catholic Church, is the family. The family is the most important unit of any society. As the family goes, the society goes. And it's not just something from faith. That is something that we know from look at the data. So again, sorry, a very, very long answer there, Jan. But that's look, I would always warn people, I'm a politician now, and I used to be a political science professor who sometimes taught 3-hour classes. So I could talk for a long time. I have to try to hold myself back sometimes, but sometimes it's hard.
No, it's great. But as we are coming to an end now, just one last question, which I hope should be easy. If somebody from Vienna calls you and asks you for a recommendation for which person to vote, what would you recommend?
Well, Jan, I've known you now for 10 years,
yes,
probably, and I know what you stand for and you believe, and you're in everything. It's funny. Quick story. There's someone from England, I had a professor from England when I was in grad school, and said, I don't understand, you Americans, you vote for, you ask someone who they vote for, and they'll say, I voted for Bob Smith, because I like him. He's a nice guy. So you, Jan, fulfill all of everything in terms of where you stand, your background, what you've done, and you're also a nice guy. So all those together, and I'm 100% with you. I'd vote for you if I can, if I could do that, but alas, I cannot. But I certainly wholeheartedly endorse you, because I know who you are, and I know what you have done, and I know you do a great job.
Wow. Dan, that means a lot to me. You didn't just say you vote for Jan, you explained why. Wow, thank you. Very touched. Thank you. You took your time. You took this 1 hour to talk. It's funny, it's easier to make it this way than just wherever we meet. There's so much going on. So finally we could speak just 1 hour uninterrupted. Thank you very much. Please send my regards to Judy, your wonderful wife, and to your whole family. And I hope we meet soon again next year.
As soon as possible. So good luck and God bless.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Auch meinen Zusehern, danke sehr, dass ihr zugeschaut habt. Ich hoffe, es war für euch spannend. Noch einmal zum Abschluss, weil man es eben nicht oft genug sagen kann. Hinter mir sieht man, wie man für mich die Vorzugsstimme geben kann. Am Wahlzettel einfach ganz rechts Ledochowski oder 33 schreiben. Wenn man noch andere christliche Kandidaten unterstützen will, Plattform Christdemokratie empfiehlt Sua Demek. 850 Stimmen brauchen wir und wir können wirklich etwas ändern. Danke sehr und bis zum nächsten Mal.